I've been in a lot of foxholes in my life, and a lot of trenches, and there's no one I'd rather have by my side than Daisy Daines. We're so grateful to have Austin. Austin's a great leader in many capacities, a father. Grace tells me he's a good husband. It's not that that's already one, so confirm. Dave's just really excited to have you on.
Thank you, dude. Excited to be here.
Some other accolades of Daisy. Daisy was actually a phenomenal sales rep for Romney Pest Control, one of the pillars at that company when they had a door-to-door team. Has helped co-manage many teams over the years. Was my, what would you call that? My car partner. My very first summer.
True.
Coming out. And dude, we're just really excited to go over a lot of the old fun stories and just learn from you, brother.
Dude, it's been 10 years since our first summer.
I know, dude. I was thinking about that actually the other day. I'm like, dude, 10 years since high school? 10 years. It's crazy how fast the time's flown, dude.
It's wild.
I feel like a fossil. But looking back on that, 10 years ago, you're going out to sell in Dallas, Texas. Leaning back on that experience, when we went back, and what's some of the biggest things you learned just going out and hitting the doors and selling?
I think one thing that was, first off, it was so foreign to me what I was even going to be doing, because I didn't have an older sibling or someone close to me that had done it. I mean, obviously we had uncles that had done it for a long time, but I hadn't been close enough to experience what it was like. And so I think being blind to the whole situation made it better for me to experience just getting thrown in the deep end. Just, you're going to go out here, you're going to knock doors all day, and you're going to try to sell some pest control. I think one of the biggest things I learned from that experience is if I put my time and effort into something, I can eventually figure out how to do it. And I think I learned a lot of things. I learned how to live on my own. I learned how to communicate with people. I think that's one thing that it's easy to communicate with your friends in high school when you're around them and your team and your family. But once you're communicating with random strangers, I think learning how to communicate and do it well is a huge skill that benefits you in all parts of your life. And I think, just learning how to work hard and enjoy work. I think a lot of people struggle to enjoy what they do. I think finding a way to enjoy what you do, even if it's hard, is something that has been super valuable to me.
Well, and what's crazy to me is I think a lot of times when people hear hard work, they either think, it's fun to work hard. It's fun to wear yourself out and come home and be like, oh, dude, I gave it my everything.
Yeah.
And looking back on our stories, when we started out, that first summer when we were learning how to do it, and the second summer when we were teaching people how to do it, I just think back and some of those days were some of the funnest times of my life, even though we were doing one of the hardest things I've ever done.
True.
Yeah, just the crazy stories with people getting chased out of areas, people getting dogs pulled on them, the cops coming. There's just so many fun things that happen in an environment where you're pushing yourself to your limits.
Yeah. And I think one thing I learned really quickly is that I think it was easy for me, just coming from high school, to see some things as man, that's a big deal. When someone was blowing up at me on the door, at first I was kind of timid about it. Oh man, that's a big deal. I ruined their day, or that's a big deal but seeing Greg brush a lot of those things off because he had done it for so long. It's not a big deal. Just go knock on the next door. Or calling him and complaining about something that had happened, and he's like, no, it's not a big deal. Just keep going. I think that was another thing that helped me see that I think it's easy to get in your head sometimes when you're doing something hard and when you're doing something that you're not seeing go your way. But the more you can just brush off as no, it's not a big deal. I'll just get the next one. I think is a mentality shift that has helped me since those summer selling.
I went through the exact same thing. I felt like when I first went out, the no's, and really I carried them with me.
Yeah.
And the freak outs, and I internalized them so much. And I think learning in life that hey, a lot of those problems that people will present to you, they're not your problems, and you can kind of keep rolling on and keep rolling through as long as you know in your heart of hearts you're chasing a good cause.
True. Yeah.
And I think when you're younger, you're so used to like when people freak out, everyone being like,
Yeah.
"Are you okay?" Like, and I think it's a great life lesson that the doors do teach you. That it's just like, hey, as long as you honestly are out helping and truly trying to love people, good things are going to come of it.
Yeah.
And if people do present opposition, just smile and wave.
100%.
Well, and you talk a lot about communication right there. I think I've always heard that like a summer selling or an experience is worth so much, and people compare it to so many different things. For you though, if you had to be like, has that transitioned pretty well? I mean, kind of one of the things I wanted to hop on. You've since done several things in your career and kind of went on in a lot of different fields. Do you feel like that communication is still benefiting you in your career and has helped you like in all those different fields that you've been a part of?
I think hands down, 100%. Right now I'm a software developer, and software developers are traditionally known for being bad communicators. Just the stereotype of always being glued to the computer, not being very social, not having good communication skills because there's been a lot of time spent at the computer. But because I've learned so many different ways of how to communicate and how to do it well, that's one thing that I get praise on at my job is how well I communicate, because I've come from a non-traditional software background where I learned how to communicate and work hard first, and then I learned how to code, versus I think a lot of people traditionally learn how to code when they're young and work hard, and it's harder to learn how to communicate later on when they're already good at what they're doing.
That's really interesting. And with your job now and kind of stuff, like getting into that, the hard work, obviously, that you learn from summer sales, I feel like transition really well over to that as well. There's like, people don't understand how hard it is sometimes, I think, to go out all day for 9 hours a day and just give your all to something. And I don't think anyone's truthfully like, hey, that's the number one thing I want to do, or like, but I mean, going into like coding now and stuff like that, I think it just preps you for the rest of your life to be like, hey, I'm going to go and just dedicate myself to something that maybe it's not my favorite thing in the world, but I'm going to figure out a way to show up well and do it at a high level. And it's going to help me on my next journey.
Yeah.
I feel like summer sales has always been for me, like it's a vehicle to get to the next big thing.
Totally.
And I think it's just a great training ground for all those other fields.
I think one thing that I've noticed is being challenged to do something that I had zero experience in with, and when you're selling, you're by yourself. So you don't have someone for a majority of the time holding your hand, telling you what to say in your ear. You're doing everything on your own. I think because I had that experience of learning how to do something and getting through challenges and solving problems, it's helped me be less scared to try something completely new for my career, to go into, I did coaching for a little bit. I was less scared to go try coaching out of nowhere because I'd already done summer sales and done something that was so hard by myself. And then also then to transition into coding, which is a very tough thing to do if you didn't take any courses in high school or in college, to then try to learn how computers work and how to write code. But because I had that experience of, I've done something really hard for a really long time with no experience prior, why can't I do this?
Yeah. No, the problem solving that you learn it's insane, and it's so beneficial in everything you do next. So let's say if you could go into a room of like freshly graduated, like about to go out and hit the doors, what's something that you're like, hey, I wish I would have known XYZ to make sure that I went and had a big summer? Is there anything that you're like, hey, like I would have studied this, I would have put myself I would press better attention? Is there anything like that, or anything you would like give them or direct them to look at?
I think I would say two different things. If I had a group of people that were a couple weeks or a month out from doing it, or more time than that, I would encourage a lot of practice before hitting the doors of just simple things like the pitch and overcoming objections. Those two things being prepped on before you've even knocked a door are huge in hitting the ground running. I think if I'm talking to someone who has a day before they go and they haven't done anything, I think it's to embrace the challenge, knowing that it's going to be really hard, but also know that you can become good at something even if you're not good at something when you start at it.
I love that. And that goes along really, really well with my next question. I guess like we've all been there when it's the first weekend. It's rough, it's tough. You don't feel like you can swallow it all.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times people study really hard or focus like, okay, what do I need to know or what can I know before I get into it? But I also think once you're a week in, 2 weeks into that journey, and maybe things aren't going as well as you need them to, I think a lot of times that person kind of needs to be spoken to as well. And what would you say to someone like that maybe is like, hey, like I've had a rough go at the beginning. I want to make this happen. In the years that we've obviously went out and like sold together and stuff like that, what were some things that you saw that like helped those people like either bounce back, grow, or get to the next level?
I think sometimes it's easy to get in your head very quickly because it's easy to compare yourself to other people at your same experience level who are doing better than you. And so I think it's easy if it's been a couple days or a couple weeks and you're not performing at the same level that maybe someone who came out the same day as you is. It's so easy to get in your head and be like, I'm not good at this, or I can't be good at this. That I think is where it's got to change. The mindset first is it's got to be a growth mindset where maybe you haven't performed as well as the other person in that amount of time, but it doesn't mean you can't perform at the same level or better in the next 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. But it's going to take a lot of hard work today and tomorrow and the next day. So I think, it reminds me of sports so much because I'm such a big sports guy. I played sports all growing up that the more you can go back and rely on the fundamentals, the things that help you sell, the things that help you excel at sports, the more you're going to see the fruits of it as you keep doing it later on.
And to tying it into sports, like growing up, a lot of times the kid that was great at basketball, baseball, football in 7th or 6th or 5th grade, they weren't the kid that was like starting or playing varsity their senior year. And I think if you can think about that too in some, like it was summer sales perspective, a lot of times if you only focus with like, I would call it like your 7th grade like
yeah.
perspective, if that you think that's the end of the line, you're going to be shocked that like, holy cow, in a couple of years so much is going to change as long as you can just still keep putting in constant effort.
Totally.
And what's funny too is like a lot of times I think people think it ends in high school, but there's a lot of people that I've seen that weren't very good at the end of high school, and now I go to like a rec center, I see them now, and they're phenomenal. And the cool thing about any journey is it really doesn't end. It only ends if you decide that it does. And I think if you can just tell yourself like, hey, I'm just gonna keep doing me. I'm gonna focus on what I can control. You'll learn it and you'll pick it up.
Totally. And I had, going on that same thing, I had 2 friends in high school, from high school, who went on to play college basketball, who one of them for a majority of our high school career didn't start a game for us. Kind of like that whole Devin Booker thing of being the 6th man for Kentucky and then is now one of the best players in the NBA. But I think because of that experience, he grew so rapidly and he learned how to work really hard that by the time he was graduating, he was getting looks at to go play places because he had learned how to do the hard things versus someone who had been good 7th grade, 8th grade. Everyone else had caught up to them by that point, and they weren't someone that was as good of a recruit as someone who was willing to outwork them.
Yes. Nick Saban has something where he was saying that like your talent can be one of your greatest obstacles. And I think a lot of times that can go in the same thing in summer sale. I've seen people have a great like first day or first week and then they kind of coast on that. Where I've seen people that really had to struggle, but once they got it, they took off, and it was. And so I think there's just so much to learn in the field that like you aren't going to be great overnight or tomorrow. It's a long, hard, stupid way. Sometimes the best way to do it.
True, and in the end, it's the most rewarding.
Yes. So, in your story, so I kind of like when we started out together, I don't think either of us like had like a phenomenal start. It was kind of a funky team that we were on. I don't think it was like the highest performing that our company had ever seen, or like of all the teams that we got to be on was amazing. And so it was just kind of a funny start. And I think like our second year back, we were on like a kind of again like a lackluster team. Third year it got a lot better, and then by the fourth year I felt like we were pretty good. You've seen a lot of different cultures now, and I feel like of all those years, what were things that you feel like changed? And I guess we're speaking to like the team leaders, the managers, the recruiters, the people that are taking people out. What's some things that you saw in the difference between year 1, 2, 3, and 4 when we were out selling that kind of made those years like successful or not so successful?
I think early on, at least, and being 18, it might have been just my mindset. It didn't seem like a serious job with that first group of people. It was like, I'm going to go do this for 3 months and then forget it ever happened and go back to college, go back to whatever else I was doing before, with a lot of people that were on that team. It didn't seem like people were as dedicated or took as much ownership as we ended up seeing year 2, year 3, year 4 with other guys who came in and said, I'm going to do this for 3 or 4 months, but I'm also going to practice and get ready the month before, and then I'm going to start recruiting the month after. It became more of this isn't just a 3-month thing. This is something that I'm going to do so that I can be good now in the summer, but also be good next summer because I want to come back and do this again.
Yes, and I think if you are getting into summer sales, especially if you are starting college, getting out of high school, I would go in with a 4-year plan. Because if you're like, hey, I'm planning on doing college, I feel like summer sales goes hand in hand with it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that mesh really well about them. And I think just knowing, rather than where you want to be, everyone always talks, what's your goal at the end of the summer? What's your goal at the end of the year? I think you can be like, what's my goal at the end of 5? Because I think that's when a lot of people at the end, and truthfully 4, I think, is when a lot of people end up chasing something new or doubling down and starting their own. But I think anyone, if they can go into it being like, okay, what do I want to get out of this, and view it a little bit longer, I think it's gonna be a way better experience.
And I think on top of that too, you can attach yourself to someone who's a year or 2 or a step or 2 ahead of you that has similar goals as you, which will make that process even easier for you to accomplish. So in 4 years, if someone wants to start their own thing that's on your team or that you've come into contact with and you want to do the same thing, attaching yourself to them is finding a mentor and a way to use them as someone to help you get to that goal, I think is huge and becomes such a catalyst for teams being better, becoming even better, because more and more people are attached to those bigger goals instead of, I'm just going to do this for a couple months and then I'm out.
When we were selling, what was for you, like, can you think of a time, a month, a week, or when you're like, hey, I feel like I grew a ton? I think there's a lot of periods where we're kind of just coasting. Like we go out, I'm going to do the same thing, and like we kind of just go. Was there a time when you're like, I felt like if there was a big breakthrough because of X or because of Y, and my sales went from here to here because I had this go off in my head, or I changed this or implemented this? Was there anything that you feel like this really can take a second year, a third year guy to that next level?
One thing that's interesting about that, I didn't notice it year 1 or year 2 as much, but having someone to train or having someone that's looking to you to train them or help them become a better salesman, I think is a huge deal. Because in year 1, it was just me and I was going to do whatever and I was going to figure out how to do the pitch, but I didn't have anyone looking to me for help. I didn't have someone that was like, how do I do this better? Or what do you say here when someone says this? I had none of that. In year 1, I had a little bit of it. I think it was more a lot of your guys that had come out. But as we progressed and kept going, I had some friends, had some cousins, had some people that were then asking me those questions and looking to me. And I think at first I gave a simple answer of what I had always done. But then the more it happened, the more I wanted to get more knowledge on how to do that, or different answers or different approaches. And I think having expanded my expertise on it helped me become a better salesman because I was helping other people become a better salesman.
And I think a lot of times when you probably experienced this too, but my first year recruiting, so I was very scared to like offer the opportunity to people or be like, hey, do you want to do this? One, you don't want to offend people, and that I think that goes through everyone's head. But now in hindsight, I actually had someone here today talk to me, and he's like, dude, I would have come out with you if you would have just like asked me to come out. And honestly, that broke my heart a little bit. I'm like, dude, I probably could have touched so many more lives, helped so many more people. And I think a lot of times being the guy that is willing to help or to lend a hand or to pick someone up, you see how much better it makes you just at selling. But I also think it just creates so many more like positive memories.
True.
So if you are a first, second, third year that's like, hey, should I bring out that friend or should I invite that person? I would say do it, just because it's gonna make you so much happier and more fulfilled. the experience.
100%.
Cool. I love that. So we had a lot of over the year. We had a lot of crazy people on all those teams. Let's get into all. Like, there was a lot of like really cool people and a lot of fun. But like, is there anyone over the years that you're like, they were a funny cat? Like that person, they brought a lot of laughs to the teams or the experience.
What I like about that, I mean, I think there were a lot of funny people in a lot of different ways, which was a lot of fun. There were some people that had crazy personalities, and so just being in the same room as them, you were bound to laugh. There were some people that just said crazy stuff. One person who comes to mind is Dill Gallen. I don't know where you're at, but anytime I think of crazy people who did crazy things, I think of Dill Gallen. He would say some just random stuff. You always felt like he was up to some conspiracy on the doors, like he was being so shady. Sometimes you thought you were never sure what was going to happen with that guy. He was such a wild card.
Dude, I wonder where he's at now.
That he is a firm memory in my head.
One of my favorite memories with him and me and you is like he knew we were going on missions and he just got back from his. And so he would come in our room at like 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. because I don't think he slept.
No.
Which me and you were like dead tired because we'd never done anything like that hard in our lives. And he would come in and he would like wake us up. And he'd say, on your mission, you need to learn how to tie a tie in seconds.
And in the dark, he had us tying ties in the dark. Like, that's what we thought. We thought that was what a mission was.
I love my favorite though ever was it was after like we'd been with him for a couple weeks. He came in to try and tell us that we needed to tie our ties, and you were so dead tired. And I had like gotten up. I was like, "All right, I'm ready to tie my tie." And then you were ignoring him, and he put his face right next to your head. And instead of getting up, you just closed your eyes and you put your hand on his face and just pushed him away.
I was done with him. I'm like, if this is what I need to learn, I'll learn it on the mission. I don't need to learn it now.
Oh, dude, I never ran into a situation where I needed to tie my tie in 3 seconds. No. But if I ever do,
we're ready.
Yeah. Oh, that was awesome. Those were good times. Well, so yeah, no, Dill was an awesome people. I also loved Ari.
True.
He was a fun one. Oh, dude, there's so many. Carter Orr. There was a lot of like a lot of really cool
Spencer Mead, he was a good one.
Spencer Mead.
Oh man.
But I also think too, we met some of the coolest people I think of our college like experience on those teams. And I think a lot of times people don't realize that you're just doing something hard like that. Not everyone can do a summer sales experience. And so if you can do that and you have the capability and you're going out and doing it, you're also going to meet a lot of other people that you don't get to rub shoulders with every single day in normal living. Like, you're not going to run into a lot of people that want to go out and work hard, push themselves every day at like Chipotle. Like, it's going to be tough. But in those rooms, like in a summer sales meeting, you're going to find a lot of people that I think will forever like benefit or bless your lives. Can you think of a couple names you're like, oh, dude, like those were people that I was really, really lucky to like rub shoulders with, like when we went through the camps.
One thing that's nice, because it started so close for us, we got to work with a lot of family members. I think that was cool because it gave me a chance to do something hard and to do something fun with close family members. Some cousins. I know spending the summer with my brother after he got home from his mission was a lot of fun. I think our summer in Houston, I really enjoyed. Ty, with Spence, with McLean, with HUD. That was a ton of fun. Our cousin Gabe, too. I think those groups were a lot of fun because they were also people that I had some sort of relationship with beforehand that I got to become even closer with because of the hard thing that we were doing together.
Yeah. And with all those guys, like, it's funny how even now, like, when you run into them and you like, hey, like, you remember those stories? Like, they almost all, even if they weren't family, they feel like it now.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, like, what's going on?
There's a bond there.
Yeah. Which is really, really cool. And I compare it similar to like a mission or similar to like a high school sports team. Like,
yeah.
you get that level close with those type of people.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what either of those other two experiences are, trust me that brotherhood and that bond is well worth it.
100%.
So, I mean, thinking back, I know it's been a minute since you've thrown out a pitch or gone through some closes. For you though, what was one that you found useful, like when you were going through with a customer? Like we always would do like the high five close in the morning.
I was going to say one thing that broke a lot of barriers for me was the high five close, but just the contact in general. I wasn't using the high five as much, but just getting shoulder to shoulder with someone made my selling way different than it was beforehand when it was just face-to-face, 5 feet away, confrontational. As soon as I would turn and get side by side with someone, it felt like a lot of the walls went down, and it was way easier for me to just pitch more naturally, and then for the homeowner to act like, or to at least hear me out for what I was saying.
And for those of you that don't know what the high five close is, it's basically breaking the physical barrier, like touching the customer like on the elbow, getting shoulder to shoulder with them. And what I like about what the high five close, because it taught me something very similar. I think a lot of times when we would go into knocking, it's like time to be serious, time to be hard, time to be focused, time to be professional. And the high five close kind of taught me like it's two people, like one of them might buy pest control, one of them might not, but like it kind of relaxes you a little bit. And I think there is like a dopamine release, obviously, when you do touch people in like some form or fashion. But I think it just, a lot of that close, or if you've read ABCs of closing, it just helps you feel like this is more of like two people talking than you giving a Kirby commercial.
Yeah.
Which really helped me.
And it also, for me, it would get me on the same perspective and same playing field as them. As soon as I would turn to see the way they were seeing, then it was less of them just us having a stare off and us looking at something together or looking at the house together or pointing things out. Then it became more of a team effort of let's look at this, or let's see what's happening here, or let's see the issues with the bugs versus I'm going to show you stuff and then you're going to have to look at it type of thing. It was more, we're doing this together.
Yeah. So one of the cool things, you're the only person that sold with me my very first summer, and then sold with me the very first year of like when we were in the garage, like when like that, and you came out and knocked a couple doors in Utah. I think a lot of times, like people get. I mean, the reason I bring this up, a lot of times people get really nervous when they're changing markets or they're in a different situation. What was something for you going from like Texas to Utah, like to sell? Did you feel like there was a crazy difference? Did you feel like it was still possible? Like what was talk to me on that experience of like switching from one state to the other?
I think part of me that was hesitant wasn't that it was Utah. It was just different than what I had known, which was Texas. And even then, it was Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio, and Austin. So it wasn't like I was in the same city every time, but it was the state of Texas. And so switching to Utah felt like such a big change because Utah is not Texas. But as soon as I knocked a couple doors, everyone's seeing bugs, different kinds, but everyone has bug issues. Everyone doesn't like spiders in their house, and everyone wants to keep their family safe. So as soon as I got people saying the same things and realized they needed the same service, it wasn't a big deal.
Yeah. Kind of like when you were leaving, like door to door, and like looking back over your career, was there anything you're like, hey, I kind of regretted this, or I wish I would have done this different? Is there any feelings like that or thoughts like that, or you're like, oh no, like sometimes when you ask people that question, they're like, no, I don't. There's nothing I wish I could change. Is there anything you're like, if I could go back and rewrite this story, I might change X or Y or Z?
I would say one thing that I really appreciated about being on a team with you is how innovative you were. I think it was fun. I think something I'm good at is problem solving. If I see a problem, I can find a way to solve the problem. But I think one thing that was fun with working with you for so many years is sometimes something is not a problem, but it can just be done better. And that's something that I saw you do over and over and over again is this is working, but how can I make it work better? And you would find ways to do that with your pitch, with trainings, with anything you could think of, with area, with training before the season started, whatever it was. And I think some of those things I didn't attach onto, I didn't do, that looking back, I wish I would have done more of earlier on. Instead of just focusing on what I could do in the summer.
Well, Daisy, you're gonna make me blush. I've always been fishing for compliments from you, so I'm glad you gave me one.
Well, let me say this. On that note, I remember we moved in together, 2017. I had come home from my mission. I was coming down to UVU. You were at UVU. We moved into some apartments in Provo.
By the way, just before we finish, I put us up in some of the worst apartments.
The Riv. Living that Riv life.
The year prior, someone had been like cooking meth in the same building.
We didn't have carpets. It was wild. So we're in there. It's January, middle of January. We've just moved in, and I will never forget this. We had been sick the first week of school. Second week of school, we're getting homework done. We're figuring out our classes. We're doing this college thing for the first time together. And I'm studying in my room, and you're in the room next to me, and all of a sudden, I get a knock at the door. I'm like, the heck, it's an apartment. Like, you just walk in. I'm like, come in, Doss. Knock again. I finally open the door, and you're standing there like, hey, sorry to bother you. My name's Doss. I'm like, Doss, I'm studying. And you're like, oh, this will be real quick. And you gave me your pitch. And I'm like, this man's actually practicing right now. And it was January 15th, and I wasn't even thinking about the doors. And you were pitching me in our apartment in Provo. And that's one thing that I really respected. And that's one thing that was obvious to see made you a better salesman during the summer that I think anyone could do now, is just practice. Do things before you go out. You'll be way more prepared when you start hitting the doors.
Well, thank you for that. And one thing I want to say about you, now that you give me two good compliments, you were a phenomenal just person to work with. One thing that I've always seen in going through college with you, and I think this is a great thing that I want every team that's out there, whether you're in Austin this year, whether you're in San Antonio or Dallas, you just were always a great team player. And people would say that about you, like, to this day, like every year when you tell me you can't play on a basketball team because it's too far or stuff like that, people are still like, oh, dude, I love playing with Daisy because he shares the ball, he makes the right play and kind of puts people in a winning situation. And that's one thing that I think a lot of times people get very invested in themselves, like when you're making money. A lot of brand team leads be like, I got to make sure I'm in a good area or a good situation, stuff like that. You always were really good at taking like, hey, I want to make sure that everybody else is in a winning situation. And I think in turn it puts you in a lot of winning situations. And so that's one thing that I've just always really, really admired about you. And I've always heard a lot of people say that. And I hope people can continue to keep that spirit up as they're going throughout the summers and making sure that you're putting everybody in a winning situation with the extra pass to make sure that they're going to go score.
Thank you. Yeah. Appreciate that.
No worry. Well, and just kind of, you also, every time I talk to you, consume you're good media. You're all or good books or good reads or other stuff like that. What's some books or some podcasts or something you've listened to that you're like, hey, this really changed my perspective in business or in leadership or learning? You have anything like that you could share with everybody?
I think one book I really love is called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And it's about slowing down, getting hurry out of your life. One thing that I think is hard to see because the world is such a hurried place to be is that everyone is caught up in hurry. Everyone's in a rush. Everyone's trying to do things. Everyone's always late. Everyone has way too much to do and not enough time to do it. And the problem is there's not going to be more time. There's only a certain amount of time every day, every week. And so I think one thing I've seen valuable in reading that book is if I only have a certain amount of time, there are very few things that are going to be valuable enough to me to spend time on that will matter tomorrow and the next day and in the years to come. And so I'm going to focus on doing those things really, really well instead of doing a lot of things okay. And I think that's served me well in a lot of aspects of my life, whether it's the job, whether it's family, whether it's other relationships, anything I can think of, I'm a better person. I'm a better dad, better husband, better friend, better brother if I slow down and focus on fewer things for more time rather than more things for less time.
Yeah. Just so you know, you recommended that book to me a couple years ago, and after I read it, I've never teared up during a book, but it legit made me cry. It's a very well written book, and one of the things that I think he teaches that's good for everybody, especially when you're in a job where it demands so much of you, is being able to say no to the little things that are not worth your energy, your time, your effort. A lot of times when you're out selling, I think you have enough time in the day to obviously go out and do your job, to protect your health to your best level you can, and focus on those core relationships. A lot of times I'll see sales reps, though, add in a lot of times in social media, or they'll add in a bad diet, or they'll add in a lot of these negative things, and I'll see what happens is they might win a day longer, or win in that moment, feel like, okay, I got a little more done. But over the long haul, I always see that it weighs them down, takes them off of some weird path. And not only do they not accomplish their goal in the summer, they don't accomplish their goal throughout the year, and kind of so on and so forth. And I just think that book does a really, really good job of just showing you how to protect what's most important.
Yeah.
And if anyone's out there and has some time listening to it when they're driving out or in between the season, I think it's a really good book that just teaches you how to prioritize.
Totally.
And say yes to what matters. So it's a great book. Love it. And you obviously, there's a lot of leaders that you've come in contact with. I mean, Greg was obviously a big person for both of us that was helpful and friendly. Is there anybody else over our sales career, besides anyone that we haven't mentioned, that you're they taught me a lot, or that was a great leader, or someone that I gained a lot from, and why?
I think one person I do want to shout out is when we worked in Dallas, that first summer, those first couple summers, we worked with Tammy in the office. Even though we never sold with Tammy, she was at the desk doing a lot of the stuff behind the scenes. She was someone that I respected because she did her job really well, even though sometimes not every job is seen as a glorious job or that they're the ones that are helping the company the most. I think I respected her because she did her job really well. I think that's what, like I say with sports all the time, that's what makes a really good team. A really good team is people who do their job really well, because everyone has a role to play on the team. And so not everyone is going to be the LeBron James of the team. Not everyone's going to be the Michael Jordan. But if you do your job really well, then you can help the team win. Yeah.
And I think the Michael Jordans, the LeBrons, I think people hear that a lot of times, and they're like, oh, well, I'm a Michael Jordan, I'm a LeBron, or I'm the big dog. But I think a lot of times those people have that same mentality too, of hey, yeah, I'm doing my role. And I think just more important than the accolade or the I'm big or bad, it's just are we getting done what needs to get done?
Totally.
And yeah, no, I love that answer. So, well, Daisy, I've loved meeting with you. I've got to call you Austin actually to end the pod, just because if Heather watches it later. But thanks so much for coming on. Love you, brother. Appreciate all the years we got to work together.
Thank you, bro. Love you too.
Yeah.